Hello and welcome to the DSR Daily for Thursday, February 20th. This weekend has gone by quickly. Thank God. What say you, Minna? How are you doing today?
I am feeling grateful for the 4-day week.
Yeah, I am too. Gotta love it. It makes the pain of living in this country slightly less.
It's flying by.
One story that we don't have today, but has been keeping me up at night, is Trump's threats of ending DC home rule, which, boy, that would be something. I sure don't want that. As a DC resident, sounds awful to me. But, just one of the many horrors that we have to deal with daily.
There's so much news. This show could be 14 hours long, just covering the things that happened yesterday.
It could just be a live stream, honestly.
It might need to be to keep up.
Yeah. Well, that being said, what is your first story today?
Let's dive in. President Donald Trump criticized Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, calling him a, quote, dictator without elections, and claiming that Ukraine's public support is low, despite Zelensky's consistent polling of above 50%. Trump also made inaccurate statements about the U.S.'s financial contributions to Ukraine and suggested that Ukraine should have negotiated with Russia earlier in the war. Zelensky dismissed Trump's claims as disinformation and emphasized the importance of security guarantees and continued support from Western nations to protect Ukraine from Russian aggression. I do think calling him a dictator without elections is kind of funny. Not in like a ha-ha funny way, but in like a look in the mirror, buddy kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, this has the same energy as Zelensky not Zelensky, Musk calling out unelected bureaucrats in Washington.
Right, yeah.
Especially when it's Zelensky, and on the other side of the conflict is an actual dictator without elections,
I know.
Vladimir Putin. It's just, this administration has a habit of just saying things and hoping that people will just uncritically accept them, which, to be fair, with the MAGA base is true. Mm-hmm. So, this is working on the base because the base will just believe anything, frankly. So maybe it'll work on them. And it seems like Trump doesn't have much of an interest of extending his base at all. So, I mean, I guess this will appeal to who it needs to appeal to. But I don't think anybody else is being sold on the idea of Zelensky as a dictator that wasn't already just going to uncritically accept anything Trump wanted to do anyway.
Yeah, I mean, he's so wildly popular, not only in Ukraine, but kind of just globally. So it is disinformation, but it's also like, no, you're not convincing anyone of anything.
Yeah.
The one unintended consequence I will say, though, and I don't know if this is your experience, I feel like this Trump administration has really engaged young people in foreign policy in a way that I didn't expect. Like, I get so many texts from my friends about like what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, and I'm like, this is not topics that we've ever discussed before. So that could be one good unintended consequence.
Yeah, it's so bad that even people who don't care about foreign policy have to care.
Sucks that it took this to get them engaged, but I will say people are listening. Young people are listening anyways.
Yeah, and I think that kind of started with the invasion, and then in terms of young people caring about Ukraine, and then young people caring about foreign policy extended under the Israeli invasion of Gaza. So I do think, young people are becoming more interested in foreign policy. I would say maybe kind of previous times that was the case, Vietnam, mm-hmm. and then the invasion of Afghanistan. So it does take calamitous actions for young people in the U.S. to give much of a shit about foreign policy, which is a shame. We should care about it all the time. But I guess better late than never.
True.
Well, in other news, some U.S. Food and Drug Administration scientists have reportedly been instructed to avoid using certain words, including woman, disabled, and elderly in external communications, according to two anonymous FDA sources. A list titled Prohibited Words has circulated within the agency, allegedly to comply with President Donald Trump's executive order against, quote, gender ideology, though the White House clarified that many terms on the list were misinterpreted and unnecessary to ban. The directive has caused confusion and concern among FDA staff, who argue that such restrictions hinder their ability to perform their duties effectively. Additionally, another federal health agency was told to remove terms like gender, transgender, and LGBT from communications, leading to the removal of public health information such as HIV datasets. Not at all surprising. The White House saying, well, you misinterpreted that is rich, because we're seeing this with a lot of what they've done. We're seeing this with the firings we covered yesterday, that they're trying to rehire people that they accidentally, quote unquote, accidentally fired. How much of an accident it is hard to say. But yeah, when you enact these sweeping, broad acts without much clarification, obviously there's going to be, quote, misinterpretation, because there's not really much to interpret. They're trying to play it safe. And yeah, obviously a health agency should be allowed to say woman, disabled, elderly.
No, I think
transgender.
I think woman is a disgusting word, and we should ban it.
Yeah,
I'm kidding. Obviously, that's insane. What?
Yeah, I mean, medicine has to be specific for different, for men, women, and then different genders. So
medicine is just for men, but not elderly men and not disabled men.
If you're old, you suck. No medicine for you.
Cool policy coming from an administration led by the oldest man in the world.
Yeah, for an old man who's not all there. It's kind of rich.
Other old people shouldn't get treatment.
All the old people medicine has to be saved for Donald Trump. But yeah,
there's been so much craziness that's happened in the last 12 years of this presidency, and somehow this is blowing my mind in a way that is greater than the way that other things have blown my mind.
Yeah, and to be fair, I don't think the administration actually meant for them to avoid using the words woman, disabled, and elderly. But if the order is that unclear, that's how it was interpreted, then that's a problem. It's just ridiculous. And the confusion is only going to get worse.
Yeah. Well, speaking of other things that make no sense, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has directed the Pentagon to cut its budget by 8% to realign spending towards President Trump's priorities, such as border security and modernizing nuclear forces, while reducing military command in Europe and the Middle East. These cuts, totaling in $50 billion, face significant opposition from Congress, with some lawmakers warning they could harm troop readiness and critical defense capabilities. The Pentagon aims to shift funds towards areas like the Iron Dome missile defense and cybersecurity, but the plan has drawn criticism for potentially weakening the military's readiness and disregarding long-standing strategic priorities. Yeah, we've proven that we can't do the Iron Dome. So I feel like we should not put money towards it. But I'm not a military strategist, so what do I know?
Yeah, I'm a little confused. Is this toward the Iron Dome in Israel? Or it looks like, reading the article, it's to push for a nationwide Iron Dome in America, which just cannot happen.
Yeah.
It's going to cost a lot more than $50 billion. And yeah, the Pentagon should have its budget cut. Hot take. There's a lot of wasteful spending at the Pentagon. This is one of the areas where there should be many, many reviews of how the budget is being spent at the Pentagon. And we could probably save a lot of money there. That is one of the areas where something like Doge would actually be very helpful. But it sounds like the areas they want to cut are not the areas that actually should be cut. No. We should be cutting down on the wasteful contracts, overspending on materials, not in just abandoning Europe and the Middle East. I don't think those are the ways to
and then they're reallocating. And then they're reallocating the funds to ridiculous nonsense that has been proven we cannot do.
So they're cutting its budget by 8%. but it sounds like they're just shifting the money around. So they're not even cutting its budget at all. And if they're actually trying to build an Iron Dome, that's going to explode the Pentagon's budget, which I predict that will go the way of the border wall, where not much will actually really happen. If they build anything, it'll be very minimal. Because, that would explode government spending. The Pentagon's budget would go up dramatically. And it probably wouldn't even work, because it's a lot easier to build an Iron Dome for a country like Israel, which is the size of like a small state, as opposed to the entirety of the mainland United States. Obviously, this is another one of those things where you don't really have to think critically on why something like this doesn't work. But yet the administration apparently hasn't done that.
No. To no one's surprise.
Well, speaking of the administration, and I feel like basically all our stories these days are about the administration, which is depressing, but it's the way it's got to be. President Trump expressed support for the idea of distributing a portion of the savings generated by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency to U.S. citizens as a dividend. Speaking at an investment conference in Miami, Trump outlined a proposal where 20% of the savings from Doge's cost-cutting measures would be returned to Americans, while another 20% would go toward reducing the national debt. To me, that begs the question of where is the other 60% going? But whatever. Trump suggested that such a dividend would encourage citizens to report wasteful government spending, as they would directly benefit from the savings. He praised the concept, calling it a way for people to participate in the process of cutting costs. I mean, I don't know. I guess selfishly, I like the idea. More money is not I won't say no to, but got to feel a little guilty when it's coming from the salaries of my friends who have been fired from their jobs, because I have had several friends get fired from either directly their government jobs or agencies that were funded by government grants.
I have to.
It's often said that like stimulus checks are like bribes from the administration, and I think that's kind of bullshit. But this does seem kind of like a bribe. I can't lie.
Coming from the guy who actually tried to bribe people in the election, and it worked. So,
Also, didn't Republicans criticize stimulus for worsening inflation? I would imagine this would definitely worsen inflation of just
whatever. They don't stand for anything.
Sending $1,000 checks to millions of Americans. That'll explode inflation. But especially because there's not a crisis that it's like trying to gin up demand during, which is the point of stimulus. So it doesn't really seem like a good idea. I'd probably rather just have the agencies again. Like, call me crazy, but I'd rather just like have an FDA than have like $1,000 check. I'd like to be able to just like trust what I'm eating and the drugs that I'm injecting in my body, rather than just have some money to buy like a PS5. But I don't know. Maybe Americans just like, I don't really care if I'm eating food that's poisoned, as long as I can buy the new iPhone. Maybe that's how people work. This seems like a very weak smokescreen to distract from what a disaster the Doge cuts have been and are going to be.
I tend to, I don't know, maybe I give the American people too much credit, but I tend to think that they won't go for that, and that people are getting increasingly upset about what's going on, and that less people are on board for this than voted for him in the election. And on that note, our last story, some Republicans are growing concerned as the Trump administration aggressively cuts federal jobs and slashes spending, with fears over the loss of essential agencies like the FAA and NOAA. Lawmakers worry these actions could bypass Congress's authority, leading to constitutional conflicts, particularly regarding the elimination of agencies like USAID. While some GOP members back the administration's goal of reducing waste, many fear it could undermine their role in overseeing federal funding and potentially harm their districts. So, listen, I do not support any of these people, even a little bit. However, it is nice to see Axios reporting that there are some Republicans in Congress who are not happy about what's going on, because we need their help. So regardless of if I agree with them or not, it did make me happy to see that.
Yeah, and this plays into my theory that I've had, which is this is how we will eventually be rid of Elon Musk, is that the Doge cuts will be so ridiculously unpopular once the effects start being felt. And we're already seeing that, where I've seen a lot of discourse around the many plane crashes that have happened since Trump has taken office.
Yeah.
And people tying that to reductions in staffing for the, FAA? Am I right? Federal Aviation Administration.
Mm-hmm.
And people are pissed, rightfully so, that there are so many plane crashes. And, is that a direct result of the Trump cuts? I can't say for sure. But regardless, people are associating with that for right or wrong. And once we start seeing even more effects of these cost-cutting measures, I think people are going to be pissed. And Trump is going to have to look for a scapegoat. And there will be no better scapegoat than one Elon Musk, who has very publicly tied himself to Doge. So my hope and my theory is that within maybe 2 years, Musk will be out because the Doge cuts will be such a disaster.
Yeah, and don't let the door hit you on the way out.
That the administration will need somebody to blame. And I mean, he's the perfect target. And I still think that two people like Musk and Trump cannot share power for long. It's two egomaniacs. They're not going to want to share that. That's the perfect way to get rid of him. At least I hope so.
I hope it takes less than 2 years, but we'll see.
That's my max. I think it could honestly be less.
I feel like this news cycle, like the things that are happening with this administration are happening so quickly. Like, definitely, hopefully, knock on wood.
I think it could be by the end of the year, but that seems maybe optimistic that Musk is out. But
well,
I don't want my predictions have been bad, so I don't want to make that prediction. Well, that's all we have for you today. But we'll be back tomorrow. We've got more podcasts coming out later today. So there is plenty to look forward to right here on the DSR network. But until tomorrow, bye-bye.